4 months ago, this is what the game looked like. I almost don't believe this is the same game anymore. Four months ago, the game was bland, still trying to find its visual identity, and had almost zero gameplay features done. Now, it's vibrant, finally settled into its own visual style, and most importantly, is actually starting to feel like a game. It's been over 4 months since my last devlog, and in this video, I want to take you through everything I've done. If you're new here, hi, hello. I'm making a survival tower defense game where you gather resources during the day to build your base and defend from incoming hordes of enemies at night. The whole game has an alchemy magical flair that we'll cover more later, but for now, let's go over the visual additions. Right off the bat, I want to cover the big hitters. I added shadow maps, color grading, played around with lighting a bit, and zeroed in on a color palette I really like. On the gameplay side of things, a bunch of gameplay features got fleshed out. First and foremost, I finally implemented towers in my tower defense game. I also added a day-night cycle, the first enemy, a wave spawning system, a pathfinding system, and procedural crafting and procedural towers are back in the game as well now, albeit in an entirely different form. Crafting in general works a bit differently as well from the old version, but I think it's both much cooler and a lot worse now, as there is no recipe book available yet, so you're kinda on your own. Good luck. Visuals are something that I have put a lot of thought into over the last 3 years that this project has been cooking in its various forms. I wanted the visual style to be something pleasant to look at and nice enough to stand out when you see it. I want players to instantly recognize the game and also enjoy looking at it. I think we're getting closer to that end goal with these recent changes, and I think the game definitely looks and feels more cohesive, and it's getting closer to something that I would even call aesthetic, though it's still a ways away from being complete in that regard. Shadow maps are a huge win here, and I even got them to shade the things that they cover, like the grass and even the player and any enemies that go underneath it. This is accomplished via various shaders that I will not bore you with here, but if you're interested in more of the technical side of things, come on over to the Discord and I'll tell you more about it. Some more shader magic helped me with the color grading. Everything in the game now has a slight tint to it. All of the highlights will edge towards this nice yellow color, and all of the shadows will dip into this deep purple. This looks much better than a white-black gradient. Or, if you hate it, let me know in the comments and I'll tell you you're wrong. I finally settled on a color palette I like, which is this custom one that I took from this image from the extremely cracked artist, Angry Snail. Their art is super nice and desaturated, and I love it. So I yoinked the color palette from this image here. Those 3 pieces are doing most of the heavy lifting looks-wise, but I also did add a slight overblown effect to the lighting that I really enjoy the look of. And I think fits with the visual style of the game really nicely. I think this will either look really nice or really shitty as we add more lights in, but only time will tell. These few visual changes do a lot, and there was a lot of trial and error involved in actually getting something I thought worked, but the bulk of the work was actually dedicated to gameplay and world building, because believe it or not, the two do go hand in hand here. The game is called Elixir Punk. Same idea as steampunk or solar punk, but built around alchemy and magic. I wanted the gameplay to actually reflect that, not just be a skin on standard survival mechanics. So instead of starting with an axe or a pickaxe, you get the initiate's focus, which causes whatever you break with it to drop its essence. You then use that essence to craft various items like blocks for defense or the upgraded crafting table. Speaking of crafting, this is also how you craft towers. The main thing you'll use to defend because, well, it's a tower defense game. However, going back to the point about world building and cohesion, I felt that crafting stone towers wasn't the right move. In a world based on alchemy, which is about combining the natural elements of the world, I felt that something more along the lines of botany was more suitable, and so the towers in this game are plantable. Any plant you find growing in the world you can combine with this base called verdant pulp, which you get from plants by destructing them. This will turn the plant into a sentinel or tower. Plant the towers, water them, which we don't have any mechanics for yet, and then let them grow so they can destroy incoming enemies. You'll be able to combine elixirs with your towers at various stages to influence the traits they take on. For instance, if you water your plants with fire elixir, it will grow into the fire version of that plant. Then, if you feed it ammo, a mechanic also not yet implemented, of a different type, the two will combine. So let's say the base type is fire and the ammo you feed it is explosive, then every time the tower fires, the bullets will explode on impact. At least that's the idea. Right now we just have planting and the towers will fire, but what should they fire at? Well, I'm glad you asked. We've also now got our first enemy, as well as smarter pathfinding in the game. This was one of those things that took a few attempts and iterations to get right. In the end, what I did was implement a flow field for enemies to follow and pathfind their way to the heartwood, which is this thing right here. It's not really a tree, nor is it a heart yet. This is a placeholder model for now, but this is what you're going to protect. So the first enemy is this guy, a creep vine, in keeping with the botanical theme. The enemies are all going to be similarly plant themed. I won't go too deep into the world building right now, but essentially the world is upset at you for messing with it alchemically, so it's sending these plants after the heartwood, which is the basis for your magical and alchemical powers. If you try and block them off from reaching it, they will destroy your towers, so you actually have to plan a proper base defense. You can create a maze for them to go through, but this is extremely unaesthetic, and if you guys play this way or do something like this, you will be excommunicated from the community. The enemies spawn at night. Right now you have to press F3 to get the clock info. The day is around 15 minutes long, so you'll have around 7.5 minutes to gather and set up your defense, and then another 7.5 at night. Currently, the enemy waves are pretty dumb. I use a point spawning system that allots a certain amount of points for each wave and then chooses to spawn enemies based on how much they cost to spawn. This scales up with the wave that you're on, so starting cost might be 10 points and would spawn enemies worth 10 points. Currently, there is only the creep vine, which costs half a point, but you could imagine that if we wanted a more tanky mob, it would cost 1 or even 2 points. After each wave, the amount of points is increased, and then the next night, it does it all over again. Flow fields are a huge upgrade over the A-star implementation in terms of performance. The main downside here is that each enemy cannot have its own target, so if I wanted to have a certain enemy attack your crops or a certain enemy attack you directly, I can't do that. Instead, flow fields require for different targets to be set, but this requires all close by enemies to have the same target unless they're separated into a new flow field, which I do plan to do at the cost of more memory. In addition to everything we've gone over, there is now a playtest for the current version of the game available on itch. If you join the Discord, you can get access to it and try out the pre-alpha gameplay and give me your thoughts on the main loop. Keep in mind, however, that the current crafting system is, to put it nicely, unoptimized. This is the main focus I have in the next round, so if you want to see how that progresses, you should also join the Discord. Oh, and for the next big feature, well, that is automation. Thanks for watching. If you have any suggestions, leave them down below. If you have any complaints, keep them to yourself. Thank you very much, and always remember, roll your own everything.